Welcome in, friends and future friends, to this episode of the Sports and the World podcast. I hope all of you are well and safe out there. I'm LaDarius. A lot to get to. We got a lot of football, division round this weekend. A national championship game on Monday. Coaches, we'll get to all of that. But I want to lead in a little bit to talk about two things that I really want to get to because it's going to be NFL heavy. More or less. But I do want to get before I go any further. Uh, Haley's doing her thing. She's working. Hope she's watching and then or listening. Love her. We'll get her. Hopefully, we'll have her on the show. She'll be back with us next week. Now, I want to talk about Unrivaled Basketball. Breeze took their first loss of the season. Great young team. And listen, losing to the defending champions is nothing to sneeze at. Very close game. All their games this season, single digit wins, or now in this case, their first loss. And you look at Unrivaled overall, you look at the ratings, not the ratings, Jesus. Look at the standings. Very defending champs, still undefeated 3-0. And you got a lot of 2-1 teams. You got the Breeze, you got the Phantom, you got the Mist, you got the Laces, and the Vinyl 1 and 2, Hive, and Lunar Hours without a win. But that's gonna change soon. But I'll keep shouting out this league every week. Listen, me and Haley made it clear this is a Team Breeze only podcast. Uh, but we love watching Unrivaled, and listen, and it gets me to talk about like with the uncertainty of a WNBA season. There's gonna be plenty of basketball to watch. You got Unrivaled, you got Athletes Unlimited Basketball announced their 40 their official 40 team roster, which I'll write about this week over the weekend as well as about the Breeze. So there's basketball. Now, whether it be the WNBA season, I don't know. There's still a lot of uncertainty there, but hopefully they get something done because at the end of the day, you know, it's always a tough situation. I think the players deserve what they should get. I think the demands are reasonable. I don't want to hear like, oh, the generate. No, women's sports is on the rise and they need to be paid as such. And that's the stance I'll always take regarding that issue. So be on the lookout. More Unrivaled, like I say, catch Unrivaled. Actually, excuse me. Friday, Laces Phantom, Rose, and Hive, and then you get to see the Breeze and the Vinyl kick 8:45 on Saturday, and the Miss Lunar Owls just before that at 7:30. So watch out for those games; should be fun to watch. And also, like I mentioned, Athletes Unlimited basketball. We'll get into full swing next month. Also, AUSL, 6 cities where they're going to be calling home. And what I love about the cities is that it's a little bit of history and it's a homage to how great softball is, especially when you look at the Chicago Bandits. Like Chicago's a sports town. They love softball there because that's where the Rosemont, Illinois. That's where the AU. That's where they played their home game since 2020 there. So I love that. Then you go out west to Portland. Portland's a growing women's sports town. That town there, I love having softball there in the Pacific Northwest. It's absolutely fantastic. And and then you kind of look, then you go to Texas, the Texas Volts. Listen, Cat Osterman. There's a lot of great history of softball in that state. Absolutely love that. You go to Durham, you go to the Carolinas. Duke, a great softball program as well. Maybe it's not covering the whole Carolinas, but it is what it is in that regard. I love that choice. Oklahoma City Sparks staying OG city in Oklahoma City, home of the USA softball, USA women's softball, and home of the the Softball Hall of Fame. Absolutely slam dunk there. Oh, what cities am I missing, America? Let's see. I know I'm missing, but if I miss you, I think I know what city I missed. Let's see. I got the Spark. I got the Casket. So to every other city, I apologize, but like I say, I'm just super excited for AUSL softball. If you haven't watched it, and the Utah Talons, I love Salt Lake City. I love them getting some love there. The Blaze, uh, the Carolina Blaze. It's fun. So for the cities of Chicago, Oklahoma City, Portland, with Texas, they'll play in Round Rock Stadium in Texas there, and in Utah they're going to play. Yeah, so it's all encompassing, and that's what I like. So be on the lookout for that. Let's put this upcoming song. I think I had April or Ron here in the chat. Saying what up, everyone? Hello, Ron. Thank you for joining it, and or April. So I wanted to get that out of the way because, like I say, shout out to women's sports. I'll be covering it pretty much. I'll be either I'm covering Unrivaled or covering specifically the Breeze. I'll be covering uh, Athletes Unlimited Basketball this upcoming season, as I've done. I wish my boss Penny was in here. She could tell the number of years I've covered it. I absolutely love that. Now there's team identities now, which I also love, and now I'll be covering ASL softball. So I'll get a break in between. Hopefully, maybe travel. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But so we'll talk more about that in time progresses. Weekly, we're going to talk about definitely a lot about women's sports on this podcast. So be on the lookout for that. Now, shifting gears, a lot of NFL stuff. Excuse me. So let's come to the NFL. I do want to talk about the baseball thing at the back end, but I might as well talk about it now. Cubs, Alex Bregman, and we get Edward Cabrera. We're doing good things, and I absolutely love it. And like I said, I'm gonna wear my Pete Crow Armstrong jersey on the show at some point, maybe during the summer. We'll see. We'll take a break in the summer. I don't know. But now we'll talk about NFL. So thank you for indulging me in that. Like I say, we'll talk about the baseball, definitely spring training around the corner. Then we'll talk about women's sports, more about Unrivaled, more about AUSL, more about Athletes Unlimited Basketball, all of that. So catch your breath, Darius, and let's talk about the NFL. Let's talk. I have a lot to talk about the coaching situation. Let's talk about these divisional games, and I find it to be very fascinating for different reasons. And drop in the chat or comment who do you like? Who do you like coming out of this divisional round to head up to the respective conference championship games? You can drop it here. Remember, you can drop questions here during the show on my Twitter at LaDarius_Brown, also TikTok as well. At LaDarius, same thing, at LaDarius_Brown. Just drop questions on the show. I'm happy to answer. Now, you look at the divisional matchups on Saturday. We have Buffalo and Denver. And everybody is telling me, like, I think when I had Tanya Ray Fox on the show, well, I could say last year, but kind of late last year, I think we shared the same sentiments about Buffalo, where their defense is great. Vance Joseph, who deserves to get some looks, head coaching wise, great job defensively. It's the offense, and I think that people don't look at the offense, and people are like, oh no, you're as great as Sean Payton is. If you really look at the offensive numbers, if you really look, top 15 offensively points per game. So they're a top 15 offense. They throw the ball a lot, the fourth most times, and they run it the night, in the kind of the middle bottom half of the league. And with so I don't know. And they're 20th in offensive drop, and offensive drop ending and offensive score. I'll delve more into the stats when I preview the games, which you can also catch on here. Previews will definitely be out tomorrow for this game and for the other game we'll talk about shortly. But defensively, they're top 3. They allow the third fewest points. They're second in total yards allowed, 6th fewest first downs. They allow, I can't say, they allow the fewest net yards gained per pass attempt. Second in, they're just good in rushing yards. A lot of teams don't like to run the ball. They like to, listen. They throw the ball. There's a better chance you have a chance throwing the ball against this team. That's going to be the key. I think we see Josh Allen's attempts kind of go up a bit in this matchup, but there's a reason why Denver's a favorite. Denver's not they're I see lines going at 1.5. There's a reason for that. And I say, listen, I said this a couple episodes ago. Like, if there was any pressure on a quarterback in these playoffs, it's Josh Allen, and it's not even close. I think as great as Denver's defense is, I think Denver's offense has to do well. Listen, I'm not saying Buffalo's defense is terrible. I'm not trashing it. But that's the key. Can this defense, what can this, we talk about, Buffalo's offense. We don't talk enough about Buffalo's, the defense. And listen, Sean McDermott he's got to find a way. That defense is going to have to keep Buffalo in the football game. And listen, they did very well back into that game against Jacksonville. But now we're in a situation where what are we expecting against Denver? Like I said, like Buffalo, top 5 offense. Josh Allen has a lot to do with that. Defensively, they're very susceptible. They can give up rushing touchdowns. Not so much in the passing variety, but I think I stand by my guns, and I'm going to say that this is a game for Buffalo. I think Buffalo has a chance to win this football game. I think they're on a mission. Excuse me. Listen, if you're listening to it, you're like, oh man, what's he doing? If you're watching, then anyway. Give me Buffalo. Give me Buffalo. I hear how great their defense is, but we're not talking about that offense. And listen, people say, oh yeah, but Vendetta against, Sean Payton. Yeah, maybe I do, but numbers, people lie. Sometimes you'll lie, but numbers don't. And you look at their defense, you look at their offensive numbers, like they're not terrible, but Buffalo can run the football. If you take away that, make Josh Allen beat you. And he showed that he can. So, and listen, they've been very good. They're 8-1 at home this season. So, but I give me Buffalo. I think Buffalo has a legit shot of winning that football game. And they're going to travel regardless. But let's shift to Saturday. I'll stay in Saturday. 49ers Seahawks. Third matchup this season. So they know each other very well. The NFC West has proven to be easily the best division in football. Easily. Not even close, not even an argument about it. San Francisco went on the road and beat the Eagles team, a very good Eagles defense. And it felt like that offense, for Philly, that's a whole different conversation. They're gonna be on their 5th offensive coordinator in 5 years. And people say, oh, Jalen Hurts is trash. Have we stopped to think that maybe we don't have the offense, to coordinate? So something to think about. But when I look at this matchup, a part of me still kind of feels that as great as this matchup is, if San Francisco, like this is why Robert Saleh is getting looks, because the defense. Think about this: no Fred Warner, no Nick Bosa, and they're playing elite, and then they're going to be without George Kittle. Here's the thing: San Francisco is one of those teams where, like, this is the thing. We have to see there's a difference between regular season Sam Darnold and playoff Sam Darnold. And the Seahawks are almost an 8-point favorite in some places. If I'm a betting man, if you want an alternate spread of +8, I wouldn't be upset. Because how Sam Darnold plays will go along. I know how great Seattle's defense is. The numbers will reflect that. What we covered when I do the previous game. But the question is, can Brock Purdy be upright against that great pass rush? How can they move the ball? And for Seattle, can Sam Darnold be Sam Darnold that he was in the regular season? If you can get that Sam Darnold, if you can get regular season Sam Darnold, who 25 touchdown passes, 14 interceptions, almost 68% completion percentage. If you can get that guy, 99.1 rating, passer rating, if you can get that guy, you got a shot. And we don't talk about, listen, they lean on the run. Kenneth Walker, 1,000-yard rusher. But Zach Charbonnet was the touchdown guy. So with leading the team with 12 and receiving, that Jackson Smith-Njigba guy, he might be offensive player of the year, potentially. Listen, there's this, to me, it's all about Sam Darnold. If Sam Darnold can play, because people are like, well, why do you mention Sam Darnold? Quarterbacks, listen, like a tale of two cities, essentially. So when you look at Sam Darnold, regular season, great. Now you shift to the playoffs. And listen, which was 2024 season. Listen, he completed 62.5% of his passes. He sacked 9 times in that playoff run. So we could play an offensive line for that if you want to do that. But nothing exciting. This is why this is a Sam Darnold redemption game, if there ever was one. All I'm going to say is take San Francisco plus 7.5, plus 8. Seattle, a part of me feels that if San Francisco hangs around, despite the injuries, they're going to be fine. I really do believe that they're going to be fine. It's just the question is going to be which Sam Darnold shows up to Lumen Field Saturday night. Excuse me. That's going to be the penultimate question. Which Sam Darnold is going to show up in this divisional round? Because I know Mike McDonald has this defense playing fantastic, and Clint Kubiak, who we'll talk about later, talk to head coaching openings, has a way with quarterbacks, has gotten Sam Darnold to play well this season to be in the position they are. So now we shift over to Sunday. Texans Patriots. I have a very good feeling this is going to be a very low scoring game. I really do. Simply because the Texans defense, it's Pittsburgh. That defense has been great all season long. They're in the top 10 in pretty much every defensive category. That's how good they've been. They can create turnovers. They can shut you down. They can shut down, specifically the run game. They can make you one-dimensional. And for Bo Nix, who, listen, second start, made the lead in the run game with Stevenson and Henderson. He may have similar situation with Denver with Josh Allen. You may see an uptick in the attempts because both defenses have been great at stopping the run. So you might see more passes out of them. But if this is a low-scoring game, I would not be surprised. Because you look at the Texans' offense. We saw C.J. Stroud fumble the ball 4 times, lost it twice. Running the football, they try. I think and listen, I think they do a very good job. What I will say is that you got with Woody Marks, and they're trying with Nick. They got to run the football. They have to run the football because, listen, in the red zone, offensively, they were 30th. So the key is they got to get points in the red zone. When you're facing a team like New England, you got to get, when you get in that red zone, you got to think touchdown. You got to walk away with points. And for essentially, for them to kind of walk, which would be considered an upset, and the Patriots, they're just like 3.5, 4 point favorites. And I'm like, somebody knows something. And listen, a part of me still, I think New England might be able to figure it out. But this game, I think, might be a little on the low scoring side unless one of their offenses figure out against the other's defense. Both great defenses there in that regard. Now, we shift to a game that I think is very interesting. I think you got the Rams and the Bears. Excuse me. And the Rams almost 4.5 favorites in here. This essentially comes down to can Caleb Williams, who has shown, listen, like, remember when people wanted to run, Caleb Williams out of town and all, and listen, just needed coaching because when your guy is Matt Eberflus, no, and listen, it eerily reminded the situation. Remember when the Rams drafted Jared Goff and he got stuck with Jeff Fisher? That's what it reminded me of. There's no disrespect to Eberflus or to Jeff Fisher, but when you're a defensive-minded guy who didn't necessarily have a great offensive staff, you get stuff like that. So when you bring in a guy, and so you kind of saw both teams did similar concepts. They said, you know what? We got to find an offensive head coach. So they found Sean McVay 9 years ago, and they hired and the Bears hired Ben Johnson in the last coaching cycle. The Rams have went to a Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl. In fact, traded Goff to get Stafford. I think it worked out for both sides, depending, but more so for the Rams. But the point is that this is a matchup where you have two great offensive-minded coaches. Defensively, we saw a lot of exposing, especially on the end for the Rams, Chris Schuler's been great with that defense all season long. This is going to boil down to, in my opinion, when I look at each team, who can find their number one guy the most? Matthew Stafford, how often can he find Puka Nacua? That's a question. I think it's a legitimate, because listen, in that game when they played the Panthers gave them absolutely everything they had. Everything. The kitchen sink, everything. But in that game, you look at the number of times that Stafford looked toward Nacua. And so when you look at the targets, he targeted him 18 times. Excuse me. Think about that. 18 times. And targeted Devontae Adams 13. And in terms of completion receptions, Puka had 10 for 111 and a touchdown. Devontae had 5. But the point is that 15 of Stafford's 24 completions went to those two guys. So that's going to be key. I expect the targets. I wouldn't be shocked in that regard. I think you have to go with your number one guy. Now you look at the Chicago Bears, who knocked out their divisional rival in the Green Bay Packers. Now you look at that game and you look at what Caleb Williams did. And you look at the matchup here with Caleb Williams, a coming out party there in terms of passing. He targeted Colston Loveland 15 times. He targeted Luther Bird, DJ Moore. He targeted at least, outside of Loveland, 3 other guys got at least 5 or more targets. The key is, listen, he went after the guys who he trusted all season long. That's essentially what this matchup boils down to. This game is going to be, how can I get the ball to my number one guy, who I trust? Caleb trusts Colston Loveland, and Stafford trusts Puka Nacua. So, listen, I'm not telling you sprinkle a prop. Listen, they're going to get, listen, their reception. Listen, I would, they're going to get at least maybe 7, at least. Like, if we, that's what's going to come down. Who can get their ball to their top guy? That's what it's going to boil down to. In that regard, excuse me. So, speaking of teams who are in the playoffs, we got to talk about teams who aren't in the playoffs and the head coach. And this is where I really want to go all in. But if you're still sticking around, thank you. Like I say, drop questions if you want. But I feel like I'm talking to myself, which I know you guys are listening. I see the number. So, but before I go forward, like and listen to this episode, every episode of the Sports in the World podcast. Watch on the YouTube channel. As well, subscribe, leave a comment, leave some stars, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. As well, much appreciated. Now, when I look at these head coaches, there's 9, maybe 8, potentially, reportedly, John Harbaugh going to the New York Football Giants. I wrote down the head and what I like. Well, I wrote what I think of each team in the openings, and maybe a prediction who I think they should go with. I'm not one to predict, teams where they go, but there's some I think that feel it fits. I'll start with the Dolphins. They have the number 11 overall pick. Their cap situation is terrible. 26.3 million, and they paid Tua. And I could argue Tua has cost 2 guys there. He cost Mike McDaniel his job and cost Brian Flores his job. Because now you look at Brian Flores, he's not looking pretty good. Maybe he was right. People hate to admit, like, people hating on, he sued the league. Yeah, okay, but he was right about Tua, respectfully. Mike McDaniel, great offensive guy, that didn't work either. So now we're on a situation where if you're at the Dolphins, that job, while you have a top 15 pick, like, how do you get, like, no team would take on the salary. Mine would have to pay a bulk of that salary if you wanted to move. And there are a couple of teams that could be interested. I think of Atlanta, who we will talk about. Maybe Arizona, who we'll also talk about. But this opening is not attractive. Outside of South Beach, it's not. But I still think there's room to grow. I do believe that you get the right guy in there. And Chris Shula's the guy that I've seen floated around there with the Don Shula. Yeah. But I don't know. That it's a situation where I simply don't know. Like, that job, is it attractive enough to get a guy? Excuse me. So, the Shula name is pretty synonymous in Miami. So, to have his grandson take over the Miami Dolphins, that would be a story. That's the name that sticks out because you need a defensive guy. Because it showed it could work with Brian Flores. You bring in the right offensive staff, it can work in Miami. I really do. It's not a terrible, terrible job. It's just that you got Tua. That's what do you want to do with Tua Tagovailoa? That's the question. And then you look at Arizona. Arizona is slightly more attractive because they have a number 3 overall pick. But you still have Kyler Murray. I think that job, it's not secure. And I don't, respectfully, if you're a head coaching candidate, Darius, what do you, yeah, they finished 3-14, Jonathan Gannon's gone, whatever. But here's the thing. When you look at this organization, from a historical concept. So when we look at uh, when you look at Jonathan Gannon 3 seasons, Kingsbury 4, Wilkes 1 and done, still aggravates to this day. Arians 3 seasons. No, excuse me. Arians had 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. He had 5. I can't count. Hunt was the guy that led them to the Super Bowl. Since Winston Hunt, they've had Arians, Wilkes, Kingsbury, and Gannon. Doesn't feel secure. Like Kingsbury was a great guy, the last coach to lead them to the playoffs back in 2021, but that's it. Like what attracts to the job is that if you can hire a coach who has the right staff, because staff's important. What are you going to do with Kyler? Because there's a reason why Kyler got shut down and benched. Jacoby Brissett looked very good. Jacoby Brissett is one of those guys, one of the best. I refuse to call him a backup. One of the best dependable quarterbacks we've had. Doesn't get enough credit. I put him and Jameis Winston. I put a couple of guys in that category. Like they may not be franchise, but if you need them to start some games, start a season, they're in a pinch, they're your guys. So that number 3 pick will attract. And I don't know, outside of Fernando Mendoza, I don't think Dante Moore is coming out. Someone could correct me in the chat on that. But I don't think it's a very attractive job. The only reason why it's better is because they have a top 5 pick. And that might attract them like, okay, maybe I can fix Kyler, or maybe I have the option to get rid of Kyler and trade him in the offseason because their teams are going to need quarterbacks. So something to kind of think about there. And then I'm looking down again, the Raiders job. Top pick and plenty of cap space. And the whole Pete Carroll thing didn't work out, unfortunately. The Geno Smith thing didn't work out. They're going to get Fernando Mendoza. So the goal is hire a coach, offense or defense, a background that can help Fernando Mendoza. I think that's the situation that I feel. And listen, I think of names like Robert Saleh could potentially build a solid staff. Now, given the chance, he just didn't have a quarterback. Has to build a great staff. I don't think that search is really limited. Offensive defense, like how most teams are limited in. So that's kind of something to look out for. You look at the Giants, number 5 pick. They got Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo. That job might be John Harbaugh. But let me tell you something. You hire John Harbaugh. I know I've said some things about John Harbaugh, and I stand by what I've said about it. I'm not going to mince and take it back. But if you bring in Todd Monken, eases the concern. Is that we saw like with Todd Monken and the work he did with Lamar Jackson, like he could help Jackson Dart. Like the track record, it's just with John Harbaugh. It's like I still go back to the fact you had Lamar Jackson and you couldn't take him to the Super Bowl. And people say, "Oh, well, there's Mahomes," and listen, I'm to the belief where I don't like putting Joe Burrow in the category. Until the Bengals become serious about winning, I can't put it. But when there's there's Allen, and then there's Mahomes, and then like Lamar's easily clearing probably the best quarterback out of those 3. Or you put top 2, we can listen, debatable. And you couldn't get into a Super Bowl. That's my concern. It's that can John Harbaugh actually create what is he going to look like post Baltimore? That's a question I have. The Titans, number 4 overall pick, almost $96 million in cap space. That to me is a very, very attractive job. You have Cam Ward, you can take that 5th pick, get a receiver, gets offensive line. You could build around Cam Ward. Cam Ward has shown that he can be very, 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 very good. So that's something to kind of to consider in that regard. So So I'm very curious of kind of where they go in that regard. So, like I said, when you got the general manager with the Chiefs background, I wouldn't be shocked. Spagnolo, Nagy, I wouldn't be surprised one of those two got the job. I would not be surprised. No matter how you feel about them, you go with what you're comfortable with. Excuse me, in that regard. So now you look at the Browns, great defense. Number 6 overall pick. I think they go offense. I've heard the name Mike McDaniel be thrown around a lot. I'm not, but it's interesting. Whoever gets that job, I want them to keep Shadur as quarterback because Shadur showed that. I'm not saying he's the friend. All I'm saying is that Shadur looks like hope. Because at the end of the day, I don't like Deshaun. No, you got to turn that chapter. You got to turn that chapter. Because Kevin Stefanski wasn't a trash coach. It's just that what his ultimate downfall was Shadur and in that regard, like the whole situation. Like Kevin Stefanski, I'm not saying he got a raw deal, but he didn't exactly potentially probably didn't want Deshaun Watson. But owner did, money, whatever. And he did the best that he could. And Deshaun could stay healthy. Then you get Dylan Gabriel. That didn't work out. Shador showed that he can do something. Get it. Listen, you take that number 6 pick, once again, sell him with the Titans. Build around a guy who's your franchise quarterback. I don't think that's hard in principle, in my opinion. It's just something to kind of think about and consider in that regard. So, still a very attractive job to me. The Falcons. They have a great defense. We don't know the Michael Penix Jr. situation. And this is where I feel that Clint Kubiak's name, I hear Stefanski's name, guys who've worked with quarterbacks, because you meant potentially bring in a 1 year, or potentially with Stefanski, this could be an excuse to keep Kirk Cousins because of the familiarity. Because both of them are familiar with Kirk Cousins and for Minnesota. So I feel that they may go that route because if Penix isn't healthy, which all intents, I don't think he will be by the start of the upcoming of next season. Like, unless you plan to unload Kirk Cousins, which, once again, it's the contract situation. I think you hire a guy who's familiar with Kirk Cousins and who, more importantly, developing quarterbacks. Kevin Stefanski, familiarity. Clint Kubiak, familiarity. I believe that you get one of those two guys, you got something. To me, one of the two guys just makes a whole lot of sense in that regard. So it's a very attractive, like, listen, it's a very attractive job because also they're in the NFC South, which is respectfully a winnable division. Like, if you don't believe me, go look at the division of the last 5 years, and you'll be like, oh yeah, here's the point. It's a winnable division, like 10 wins. Like, think about this year. If Atlanta had beat the Jets, they'd have won the division. 10 wins. All it takes, 10 wins. The bar is not super high, respectfully. So we shift to the final two teams. And the Steelers, stability. Tomlin, 19 seasons. Bill Cowher had 15. Jeff Noll had 23. Fourth head coach since 1969. The Rooney family gives you the space to grow. Remember, Bill Cowher had a couple of 6-10 seasons. Got a Super Bowl. Mike Tomlin, 19 seasons, no losing season. So they're very patient. They're a very patient organization. And we got to remember when it comes to Mike Tomlin. Like, think about this. When Bill Cowher stepped down, and so when he stepped down, and nobody knew who Mike Tomlin was. Nobody really knew who he was. And they just found this guy. And you look at his background. When they hired him in 2007, he was 35 years old. He was one season as a defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. One season as their defensive coordinator. And they hired him. But you look at his experience before he worked. He was with Tony. He was with Tampa Bay, 2001 to 2005. One season as a defensive coordinator, and became the Steelers coach at 35 in 2007. The Steelers showing you the model that they follow. So sticking with that, so when Chuck Noll stepped down after the 1991 season, they hired some guy named Bill Cowher. So when you look at Bill Cowher's resume, he was hired at 35 years old in 1992. He spent 3 seasons before that as the Kansas City Chiefs defensive coordinator. And you look at his history, he spent 4 seasons with the Browns from 1985 to 1988. 2 seasons as special teams, 2 seasons secondary. Chiefs coordinator from 89 to 91. 92 at 35 takes the job. They know what they're looking for. And so it simply leads me to believe that this job is a short list. They're going to interview everybody. So they're going to do their due diligence, and they're going to look for everybody. But to me, I think this job, the criterion, the question is, does the criterion change? Like, in terms of, like, where do we go? So when you look at, how can I phrase it? When you look at kind of how the Steelers go up their coaches, it's essentially guys under 40 who defensive background, coordinator, defensive background. And to me, there's only a handful of guys that fit. Now, the age may be a little bit different, but like you look at Jesse Minter, defensive assistant for the Ravens, went back to college, Vanderbilt, and from Michigan, came over with Harbaugh. He's 42, which is not old by any circumstances. Let's be. I'm not saying, oh man, he's a certain age, or he's washed. No, it's just that if we go by the model, if we kind of go by what we see, they're gonna hire a guy who not under the radar. He a coordinator, but not just like a well-known coordinator. So it makes me look at other options. Excuse me. So I look at guys like, people may not like the name, like it makes me kind of maybe potentially think about guys like, I don't know, Chris Shula. I really do believe that this job is for a handful of people. And I think the Steelers know exactly who they want and what they're looking for. If you look at Chris Shula, who I talked about, Chris Shula, yes, there's the Dolphins connection, but he's 39. He's worked with the Rams since 2017. Linebackers coach, outside linebackers, defensive back, pass game coordinator, defensive pass game coordinator, linebacker. And then became the defensive coordinator just in 2024. It fits. Jesse Minter fits. Like, he's for, like, the guy, like to me, it's Jesse Minter, Chris Shula. I think of those guys. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Brian Flores gets the job. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers have a model, and it's worked. And you don't see them in the sweepstakes of trying to overpay coaches. Just like for Mike Tomlin, like they still have his rights. They're going to trade. They're going to get a lot back. He's going to hold off. I think do television, do that, and you'll find the right opening. And the only other job that I think is like, listen, it's the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar. This is a job built for a guy who essentially the goal is get Lamar Jackson to a Super Bowl. That's the mission. That's the goal. And so when I look around at that, I think Kevin Stefanski, I think Clint Kubiak, I think of those two guys who could help a track record. Like I don't want to hear Mike McCarthy. I really don't. Because I just don't. Like, I've seen people online say, oh, Mike McCarthy, stop. Like, he showed you in Green Bay. After that Super Bowl, boom, gets fired, goes to Dallas, can't get them to a Super Bowl. And Dak Prescott's not trash. Like, think about the quarterbacks he's had. He's had Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott. Don't like Dak Prescott. You look at the numbers. I'm not gonna. I just argue with the money maybe Dallas gave him. I'm not gonna argue with his stats. Kid couldn't get into the Super Bowl. And you get a guy who's a lock for the Hall. Dak, a couple of years, we would talk about him in the Hall of Fame, having a Hall of Fame career. That Ravens job is very attractive. And Lamar deserves a coach who's going to bring in a staff that still utilize his skill set and bring in a great defensive staff. Because to me, Bill Belichick showed you don't have to be an offensive mind. He had solid offense. It's not terrible. He had Josh McDaniels. He had Bill O'Brien. He had Charlie Weiss. He had a great system of people. I don't know what the bejesus happened to him in that 2022 with Mac Jones. We put Matt Patricia and Charlie up. I don't know what happened there. It's like he's like, oh, we'll see, and then like, oh, yikes. So, but other than that, hire a great staff, and that's the mention to take away there. And friends and future friends, thank you for joining for this episode of the Sports in the World podcast. And by the way, for the national championship game, no one's able to stop Indiana, and I'm not going to pick against Indiana ever again. Give me Indiana over Miami. Could be wrong, but listen, stop Mendoza, make him throw the ball more, make him uncomfortable. This Miami defense can do that. And I thought Oregon's defense was great, but see where that went. But friends and future friends, thank you for watching and or listening to this episode of the Sports and the World podcast. Till I see and or hear you again, I'm LaDarius Brown. Be real, be blessed, and be safe. We're all here from the Sports and the World podcast.